A forgotten Apache bride helped an injured cowboy without knowing she would change his life. The hot sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trails of the Southwest, and the vast canyons stretched endlessly in every direction. Jacob Miller, a young cowboy, guided his tired horse along the rocky path, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had been traveling for days, moving cattle across unforgiving land, and the journey had taken its toll. Sweat streaked his face, clothes clung to his back, and his hands ached from holding the reins. Yet Jacob pressed on. He had a reputation as a hard worker, a man who never gave up, and he wanted to keep that reputation alive. But the desert had its own rules, and it was quick to remind travelers that even the strongest men could be vulnerable. Jacob's horse, a loyal but weary mare named Daisy, stumbled over a hidden rock. The sudden misstep sent Jacob tumbling over her side, and he landed hard on the rocky ground. Pain shot through his leg, and he cried out, but there was no one around to hear him. The canyon walls echoed back his desperate calls, mocking his struggle. Jacob tried to move, but every attempt made the pain worse. His ankle was twisted at an unnatural angle, and a cut on his arm oozed blood that he could not reach. The sun burned him, and he felt the dry wind scraping his skin. Alone, he realized the severity of his situation. If no one found him, he could be trapped there for days, maybe longer, with no water and no way to call for help. Fear began to creep into his heart, but he refused to let it take over. He knew panicking would only make things worse. Meanwhile, hidden among the shadows of a nearby cliff, a young Apache woman named Ailn watched silently. She had lived in these canyons for years, ever since she left her tribe after difficult circumstances forced her family apart. Life had not been easy for Ailn. Many people thought she had disappeared or had no family, calling her a forgotten bride, because she was once promised to someone she never married. But she had found a life here, one connected to the land, learning its secrets and surviving with the skills her ancestors had passed down. When Ailn saw Jacob fall, her heart tightened. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts, and something about this man told her he was in grave danger. Still, she was cautious. Outsiders had often brought trouble, and she had to protect herself. Slowly she approached, staying behind rocks and using the natural cover of the canyon. She watched him struggle to move, noticing the twisted ankle and blood on his arm. She knew she could not leave him there. Carefully, she moved closer. Her presence startled Jacob, who had not noticed anyone else in the area. "Who's there?" he called, wincing as he tried to sit up. His voice was rough from the pain, and fear added a tremble. Ailn stepped out from behind a boulder, hands raised to show she meant no harm. Her dark eyes met his, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, two strangers connected by circumstance. I need help," Jacob said, his voice barely above a whisper. He tried to shift, but the pain shot through him like fire. Ailn knelt beside him, careful not to move him too quickly. She examined his injuries without touching him roughly, her movements practiced and calm. "You are hurt badly," she said softly. Her voice was gentle, carrying the quiet authority of someone who knew the land and how to survive in it. Jacob tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He had not expected anyone to be here, especially not someone like Ailn. She wore simple clothing made from animal hides, her long dark hair tied back so it would not interfere with her work. Around her neck hung a small pendant, carved from stone, a sign of her connection to her people. Despite the harsh environment, there was a calmness about her that made Jacob feel safe, even as his body throbbed with pain. Ailn quickly moved to help him. She produced a small bundle from her satchel, which contained herbs, clean cloths, and a flask of water. Jacob's eyes widened. He had expected danger or suspicion, but she was offering him help without question. With skillful hands, she cleaned the cut on his arm, applying herbs to stop the bleeding. The smell was strong but soothing, and Jacob felt a warmth spread through him, not just from the treatment, but from the simple kindness she showed. You're going to be okay?" Ailn said, her voice steady. "We need to stop the bleeding, and then I will help you move." Jacob nodded weakly, trusting her guidance. Moving in the desert was difficult, and the rocks made every step a challenge, but Ailn had survived in these canyons alone. She knew how to navigate the terrain and how to help someone in pain without causing further injury. As she worked, Jacob tried to speak, to ask her name, but the words came slowly. He realized that Ailn spoke limited English, her accent soft and her grammar imperfect. Yet her eyes and actions communicated more than words ever could. There was determination, care, and an unspoken wisdom that Jacob could sense. He understood that she had faced hardships of her own, that life had forced her to be strong and self-reliant. The sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the canyon. Jacob felt exhaustion weigh on him, both from his injuries and from the long days on the trail. Aelin worked quickly, fashioning a splint for his ankle with pieces of wood and strips of cloth. She encouraged him gently, telling him to rest and conserve his strength. She gave him water, guiding him to drink slowly so he would not become dehydrated. Every action she took was deliberate, informed by her experience surviving alone in the wilderness. As night approached, the temperature dropped sharply. Jacob shivered, his body weak and bruised. Aelin built a small fire, keeping it low but warm enough to provide comfort. She draped a blanket over his shoulders and motioned for him to rest. Jacob felt a deep gratitude, though he struggled to find the words. In that moment, he realized that he owed his life to this quiet, brave woman who had appeared like an angel from the cliffs. They sat together by the fire, a sense of quiet understanding forming between them. Jacob, who had faced danger before in his work with cattle and the rough land, felt humbled. He had thought he was self-sufficient, capable of handling anything, but he had never imagined needing help from someone like Aelin. And yet here she was, risking her own safety to tend to a stranger. Aelin spoke little, but her presence was reassuring. She motioned for him to stay warm and close to the fire. Her eyes, dark and observant, seemed to read his thoughts. Jacob realized that despite her solitude, she had a deep connection to the world around her. She moved with the confidence of someone who had lived closely with the land, who knew its dangers and its gifts. He began to see that there was more to survival than strength alone. There was wisdom, patience, and compassion. As the night deepened, Jacob drifted into a restless sleep, still in pain but comforted by Aelin's care. He dreamed of the canyon, of the harsh sun and the rocky paths, but in his dreams, the fear that had gripped him during the day began to fade. He woke several times, catching glimpses of Aelin tending the fire, her movements careful and deliberate. She seemed tireless, and Jacob felt a mixture of awe and gratitude. By the time dawn arrived, Jacob's pain was still present, but he felt stronger. Aelin had stayed beside him through the night, providing water, tending his wounds, and keeping him safe. He realized that she had given him more than care. She had given him hope, a sense that even in the harshest conditions there were people who could show kindness and courage. Jacob looked at her and managed a weak smile. "Thank you," he whispered. Aelin nodded slightly, not expecting praise. For her, helping him was not an act to be rewarded, it was simply the right thing to do. She had learned long ago that life was fragile, that strength could take many forms, and that even a small act of kindness could change someone's path. The canyon around them was quiet, the morning light soft and golden. Jacob felt a renewed determination. He still had a long journey ahead, but he no longer felt alone. He had met someone who had reminded him of the importance of trust, compassion, and courage. And though he did not yet know it, this encounter would shape the rest of his life in ways he could not imagine. Aelin, meanwhile, packed her supplies quietly, ready to return to her hidden cabin. She glanced at Jacob one last time, her expression calm but thoughtful. She did not need to speak to him to convey that he was safe for now. Her work was done, but the connection they had formed in the canyon would linger, unseen but powerful, influencing both of their lives in ways neither could yet predict. And so, in the quiet of the desert, a cowboy who had faced danger and a forgotten Apache bride who had survived on her own met by chance. The canyon held its silence around them, but within that silence, the first threads of a remarkable story began to weave. A story of courage, compassion, and a life forever changed by a simple act of kindness. The morning sun slowly rose over the canyon, turning the rocky cliffs, golden and casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Jacob Miller stirred, still sore and weak from the injuries he had sustained the day before. His ankle throbbed painfully, and the cut on his arm stung with every movement. He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness made him lean back against the rocks. Aelin, the young Apache woman who had saved him, was already busy tending to the small fire she had kept burning through the night. She had prepared a simple breakfast of dried fruits and a few wild herbs she carried in her satchel. Though the food was modest, the smell of the warm herbs and the sweet taste of the dried fruits gave Jacob a small comfort. His stomach growled, and he gratefully accepted what she offered. "You need strength," Aeon said softly, noticing his hesitance. Her English was simple but clear. She motioned for him to sit upright while she carefully adjusted the splint on his ankle. Jacob winced as she worked, but he understood she was being careful, ensuring that the injury would heal properly. For a while, they sat in silence. Jacob watched her work, impressed by her skill and patience. It amazed him how she could handle such situations without panic or hesitation. In his world, people often rushed or struggled when faced with injury or danger. Aeon, however, moved with quiet confidence. Every action was deliberate, informed by years of living close to the land. She knew the desert, its hidden dangers, and its small gifts. Jacob wanted to speak to thank her properly, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. He realized that he had never met anyone like Aeon before. She was not only skilled, but calm and kind in a way that made him feel safe despite the pain he was in. He watched her dark eyes as she looked around, scanning the horizon as if expecting something, though he knew not what. There was a quiet strength about her, a sense that she had survived many challenges on her own and would continue to do so. Can you walk?" Aeon asked after a while, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm but filled with concern. Jacob shook his head slowly. "Not yet," he admitted. "It hurts too much." Aeon nodded and reached into her satchel again. She pulled out a small water flask and handed it to him. "Drink," she instructed. "Take small sips. It will help with the pain and keep you strong." Jacob obeyed, grateful for her guidance. The water was cool and refreshing, giving him a brief moment of relief from the discomfort of his injuries. Over the next few hours, Aeon worked patiently, checking the splint on his ankle, reapplying herbal salves to the cut on his arm, and adjusting the makeshift bandages to ensure they were clean and secure. She explained each step with simple words and gestures, helping Jacob understand how to care for himself. Though they could not speak at length due to language limitations, there was a connection forming between them, a bond built on trust and mutual respect. Jacob began to notice more about her as the day went on. She moved with a natural grace, stepping lightly over rocks and rough terrain as she gathered herbs and checked the nearby water source. Her hands were strong but gentle, skilled from years of living off the land. Her dark hair shone in the sunlight, tied back simply so it would not interfere with her work. Despite the harsh conditions of the canyon, she appeared calm and confident, as if the desert itself was her home and protector. As Jacob rested, he asked quietly, "Why are you helping me?" His voice was soft, almost unsure. Aeon looked at him, her expression thoughtful. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she gestured to the canyon and the land around them. Her eyes seemed to say more than words ever could. Jacob understood that she had faced many hardships in her life, and that helping someone in need was simply the right thing to do. "I thank you," he said again, this time more firmly. Aeon nodded slightly, acknowledging his gratitude but offering no words of praise in return. For her, the act of helping was not about recognition. It was about survival, compassion, and the quiet duty she felt toward those around her. As the sun climbed higher, Jacob's strength slowly returned. The pain in his ankle was still sharp, but with Aeon's guidance, he was able to move it gently without causing further damage. She encouraged him to stand, supporting his weight as he took his first tentative steps. Every movement was careful, every step measured, but Jacob could feel the progress. With each step, he gained more confidence, and a small spark of hope ignited within him. During these moments, Jacob began to notice the small details of Aeon's life in the canyon. She had created a simple shelter nearby, hidden among the rocks and brush. It was modest but well-maintained, with signs of careful planning and resourcefulness. There were small bundles of herbs drying in the sun, tools neatly arranged, and a few personal items that hinted at her past. Jacob realized that she had lived here alone for a long time, relying on her knowledge of the land and her skills to survive. As they worked together through the day, Jacob found himself opening up slowly. He shared stories of his life as a cowboy, the long cattle drives, the harsh winters, and the constant struggle to survive in a world that could be both beautiful and cruel. Aeon listened quietly, her eyes attentive, occasionally nodding in understanding. Though she did not speak much, her presence was comforting, and Jacob felt a sense of connection he had not experienced in years. Aelin, too, shared small pieces of her own story. She spoke of her tribe, the traditions she had learned as a child, and the lessons her elders had taught her about respect, courage, and living in harmony with the land. She did not dwell on the painful parts of her past, but Jacob could sense the strength she had gained from overcoming hardships. In her quiet way, she was teaching him not just about survival, but about resilience, patience, and the importance of compassion. By mid-afternoon, Jacob was able to walk short distances with Aelin's support. They moved carefully through the canyon, avoiding loose rocks and dangerous slopes. Aelin pointed out water sources, edible plants, and safe paths, her gestures clear even when words were limited. Jacob realized that he was learning more from her in these few hours than he had in years of traveling alone. He began to understand that strength was not only physical but also mental and emotional, and that Aelin possessed a quiet power that could withstand any challenge. As the day drew to a close, they returned to the small shelter. Aelin prepared a simple meal over the fire, offering Jacob food that was nourishing and easy to digest. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, grateful for the care she had provided. The warmth of the fire, the gentle rustle of the canyon wind, and the quiet companionship of Aelin brought him a sense of peace he had not felt in a long time. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the canyon in shades of orange and purple, Jacob reflected on the events of the past day. He had faced danger, pain, and uncertainty, yet he had also experienced kindness, skill, and courage in a form he had never encountered before. Aelin had not only saved his life, but had also opened his eyes to a world he had never fully understood, a world where survival was intertwined with compassion, patience, and respect for others. Aelin, sitting quietly by the fire, watched Jacob with careful eyes. She had done what she came to do, tend to his injuries, ensure his safety, and guide him toward recovery. But she also sensed a deeper connection forming, one that went beyond words or actions. She had seen the gratitude in his eyes, the humility in his movements, and she knew that their paths were now linked in a subtle, unspoken way. As night fell, Jacob rested once again, feeling safer and stronger than before. Aelin kept watch, tending the fire and checking on him periodically. The canyon was silent around them, yet within that silence a bond was forming. It was a bond built not on words or promises, but on trust, care, and shared experience. Jacob realized that he was not alone, that even in the harshest environments, there could be allies, friends, and unexpected sources of support. By the time sleep claimed him, Jacob was filled with a quiet sense of hope. He had survived the day, learned from Aelin's wisdom, and begun to heal both physically and emotionally. And though neither of them spoke of it directly, the experience had begun to change them. Aelin's careful guidance, her knowledge of the land, and her unwavering compassion had left a mark on him, a mark that would shape the rest of his life. The night passed peacefully. The fire crackled softly, the stars shone brightly above the canyon, and the desert seemed calm and protective. Jacob slept deeply, finally free from the pain that had dominated his body and mind. Aelin sat nearby, alert but serene, ready to continue her care at first light. Together, they had navigated the dangers of the canyon, faced the challenges of injury and isolation, and discovered the quiet power of trust, kindness, and human connection. And so, as the first light of dawn crept over the cliffs, the injured cowboy and the forgotten Apache bride continued their journey together, not in distance, but in the slow, steady steps of recovery, understanding, and the beginning of a bond that neither had expected but both would remember forever. The morning sun warmed the canyon gently, filling the rocks with soft, golden light. Jacob Miller stretched slowly, testing his ankle carefully. It ached, but the pain had lessened overnight thanks to Aelin's careful care. He felt a growing sense of hope, hope that he might walk on his own soon and continue his journey. But more than that, he felt a strange comfort in the presence of the young Apache woman who had saved him. Aelin watched him quietly, her dark eyes scanning his movements. She did not rush him, nor did she speak unnecessarily. In her world, patience was a gift, and she had learned to offer it freely. Today, she decided they would begin a slow journey through the canyon together, so Jacob could regain strength while she guided him safely. As they moved, Aelin pointed out small details of the land. "Water here," she said, motioning to a shallow pool hidden among rocks. Jacob knelt, cupping the clear water in his hands. He marveled at how she knew the desert so intimately, how she could find life where he would have only seen dust and stone. "It's amazing," he said softly. Aeon simply nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. She did not boast, for in her world, survival was not about pride, it was about understanding and respect. The hours passed slowly. Jacob's steps were careful, each one supported by Aeon's guidance. The splint on his ankle held, but he still winced with every movement. Aeon encouraged him gently, reminding him to breathe and take his time. She moved beside him like a shadow, alert to every potential danger, ready to step in at a moment's notice. As they walked, Jacob's curiosity began to overcome his shyness. Where do you live?" he asked hesitantly. Aeon glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she pointed toward a hidden cluster of rocks and low bushes. "There," she said simply. "Safe." Shelter, Jacob followed her gaze and saw a small clearing tucked into the canyon walls. A modest cabin-like structure was built from wood and stones, blending perfectly with the surrounding rocks. Smoke curled gently from a small chimney, and a few bundles of herbs hung nearby, drying in the sun. It was simple, yet it had a warmth and order that spoke of care and attention. They reached the clearing, and Aeon helped Jacob sit on a flat rock near the cabin. She checked the splint on his ankle again, adjusting it carefully, and then prepared a small meal of wild greens, dried fruits, and water. Jacob ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling both gratitude and admiration for Aeon. Her skills were remarkable, but it was her patience and quiet understanding that left the deepest impression. As they rested, Jacob began to ask more questions about her life. Aeon answered with short phrases, pointing to objects, using gestures, and occasionally drawing symbols in the dirt. Through these simple actions, he began to understand a small part of her story. She had lived alone in the canyon for years, learning the ways of the land and surviving with skills passed down from her elders. She had left her tribe under difficult circumstances, and life had taught her to be self-reliant, cautious, and resourceful. Jacob listened intently, struck by the resilience and strength she had shown. He realized that she had survived challenges far greater than his own, that the hardships of life had not hardened her, but had instead made her compassionate and wise. He felt a growing respect, mixed with gratitude, for the woman who had saved him from the canyon and taught him lessons he had never expected to learn. As the day wore on, Jacob began to test his strength more confidently. He took careful steps, supported by Aeon's steady hand, moving slowly over the rocky terrain. She encouraged him gently, never forcing him, always patient. With each step, he felt a spark of independence returning, and with it, a sense of pride and accomplishment. Along the way, they encountered small challenges. A narrow ledge over a stream, a patch of slippery stones, and steep inclines that tested Jacob's balance. Aeon guided him carefully, demonstrating how to shift his weight, where to place his feet, and how to use the natural handholds the rocks offered. Jacob watched and learned, realizing that the land itself was a teacher, and Aeon was its translator. During a brief rest by a shady rock, Jacob looked at her with curiosity. Why do you help me? You don't even know me," he asked softly. Aeon looked at him, her eyes steady, and finally spoke. "Because it is right. Life is hard." "People help each other," she said, her words simple but full of meaning. Jacob nodded, understanding more than her words could say. Her actions, more than her speech, conveyed her values, courage, compassion, and wisdom. They continued their journey, moving slowly but steadily. Jacob's muscles ached, but he no longer felt the fear that had consumed him the day before. He realized that he had been given a rare gift. Not only had Aeon saved his life, but she had also taught him patience, trust, and resilience. Every step they took together strengthened not only his body but also his spirit. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the canyon, they stopped near a small grove of trees. Aeon motioned for Jacob to sit, and she began to prepare a small shelter for the night. Using branches, leaves, and cloth, she created a place that was both comfortable and safe. Jacob watched in quiet amazement. He had traveled far and faced many challenges, but he had never encountered anyone with such skill and foresight. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Jacob began to speak more openly. He told Aeon stories of his life as a cowboy, the long cattle drives, the harsh winters, the loneliness of the trail, and the small joys that made it all bearable. Aeon listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and sometimes offering small words or gestures that showed understanding. Jacob felt a sense of connection growing, one that was deeper than friendship, built on shared experience and mutual respect. Aeon, too, shared small pieces of her own story. She spoke of the land, of the herbs and plants, and the ways of her people. She did not dwell on her past hardships, but Jacob sensed the pain and loss that she had endured. Despite this, she had maintained her strength, independence, and kindness. Jacob realized that her resilience was not just physical, but emotional and spiritual, a lesson he would carry with him forever. As night fell and the stars appeared overhead, the canyon grew quiet. The fire crackled softly, and the desert seemed peaceful. Jacob felt a deep sense of gratitude and wonder. He had come into the canyon alone, injured, and uncertain of his fate. Now he had found not only a guide and healer, but also a teacher, someone who had opened his eyes to the strength of the human spirit. Aeon remained alert, keeping watch as Jacob rested. She did not speak much, but her presence was reassuring. She had taught him to trust, to observe, and to respect the land. More importantly, she had shown him the quiet power of compassion, demonstrating that even in the harshest conditions, a single act of kindness could change a life. During the night, Jacob reflected on the events of the day. He thought about the canyon, the rocky cliffs, the hidden streams, and the small trees that offered shade. But most of all, he thought about Aeon, the woman who had saved him, guided him, and shared her wisdom without expectation of reward. He realized that her influence was profound and lasting, shaping not only his recovery but also his understanding of the world. By dawn, Jacob was stronger. He could walk short distances without assistance, and his confidence had grown. Aeon encouraged him to continue practicing, carefully guiding him along the safe paths she knew so well. Every step was a triumph, not just of physical recovery, but of trust, patience, and the bond that had formed between them. As the morning light spread across the canyon, Jacob felt a sense of purpose. He had survived danger, learned from Aeon's guidance, and begun to heal. He understood now that life's challenges were not only tests of strength, but also opportunities for growth, learning, and connection. Aeon had shown him that courage came in many forms, physical, emotional, and moral, and that true strength often lay in helping others and trusting in them as well. Throughout the day, they continued their slow journey. Jacob's movements became steadier, more confident. He began to carry small loads for Aeon, assisting with gathering herbs and preparing water. Their teamwork strengthened the bond between them, and Jacob realized that he was not merely being helped. He was learning, growing, and becoming part of a partnership built on mutual respect and trust. By the evening, they returned to the small shelter. Jacob's body ached less and his spirit felt lighter. He sat by the fire, watching Aeon move gracefully around their campsite. She prepared food, checked their supplies, and ensured that everything was in order for the night. Jacob marveled at her independence, skill, and calm demeanor. He knew that she had faced many hardships in her life, yet she remained unshaken, her kindness and wisdom undiminished. As night fell, the canyon grew quiet once again. Jacob lay near the fire, reflecting on the day. He realized that he had learned more about life, trust, and resilience in these past hours than he had in years of traveling alone. Aeon's guidance, care, and quiet strength had left a lasting impression on him, a lesson he would carry forward not just for his recovery, but for the rest of his life. And so, as the stars shone brightly overhead and the desert whispered its timeless secrets, Jacob and Aeon continued their journey, not merely through the canyon, but through a growing connection that would shape both of their lives in ways neither could yet fully understand. Next morning, the canyon was quiet, bathed in soft golden light. Jacob Miller woke with a renewed sense of determination. His ankle was still tender, but he could walk with less pain than the day before. Sitting near the fire, he watched Aeon prepare a small breakfast of dried fruits, herbs, and water. She moved with her usual calm and grace, each gesture deliberate and careful. Jacob tried to speak, but words often failed him. He had so many questions about Aeon's life, her knowledge of the land, and the quiet strength she carried. Finally, he mustered the courage. "Aeon, how do you know all this?" he asked, motioning to the herbs, the paths, and the small tricks she used to survive. Aeon looked at him, her dark eyes steady, and smiled faintly. "Learned from life, from land, from elders," she said simply. Her words were few, but their meaning was clear. She had gained wisdom through experience, observation, and patience. They spent the morning moving slowly through the canyon. Jacob leaned on a sturdy walking stick that Aelin had fashioned for him, while she guided him carefully over rocks and narrow paths. Every step was a challenge, yet he felt stronger than before. He began to notice small changes in himself. He walked taller, breathed more deeply, and carried a quiet confidence that had been missing during the first days after his accident. Aelin guided him to a small spring hidden among rocks, a secret she had discovered long ago. She motioned for him to drink, cupping the water carefully in his hands. The water was cool and refreshing, and Jacob felt energy returning to his limbs. "Thank you," he said quietly. Aelin nodded, accepting his gratitude but saying nothing. For her, the act of giving help was enough. Recognition was not necessary. As they rested, Jacob began to reflect on the lessons Aelin had taught him. It was not just about survival, though her skills in the wilderness were remarkable. It was about patience, observation, and the ability to trust in others. He realized that he had lived much of his life rushing, struggling, and relying solely on his own strength. Aelin showed him a different path, one where strength was measured not only in muscle, but in wisdom, compassion, and courage. Jacob began to ask more questions, wanting to understand her better. Aelin spoke about the land, pointing out plants and herbs, explaining their uses with gestures and simple words. She told him how to find food, identify safe water sources, and avoid danger. Jacob listened intently, absorbing every lesson. He realized that this knowledge was priceless, not just for survival, but for life itself. As the day progressed, Jacob's physical strength improved noticeably. He could move without leaning as heavily on the walking stick, take longer steps, and navigate tricky terrain with greater confidence. Aelin encouraged him patiently, guiding his movements and offering small words of advice. The trust between them grew stronger with each passing hour. During a break in a shaded area, Jacob asked about her past. You left your tribe?" he asked cautiously. Aelin looked down, her fingers brushing the earth. "Yes, hard times, family separated," she said softly. Jacob sensed the pain behind her words, even though she did not dwell on it. She had endured hardship, yet she remained kind, strong, and capable. Her resilience amazed him. Jacob felt a growing admiration for Aelin. She had faced challenges that he could scarcely imagine, yet she had not let them harden her heart. Instead, she had chosen to help him, a stranger, without hesitation. He realized that courage could take many forms, not only physical bravery, but emotional resilience, kindness, and the quiet strength to endure life's hardships. As the sun reached its peak, they stopped to rest under a small cluster of trees. Jacob sat on a rock, his muscles tired but his spirit renewed. Aelin began to gather herbs and check the water source nearby. Her movements were smooth and efficient, yet gentle, demonstrating a balance of skill and care. Jacob watched her, realizing that every action she took was deliberate and meaningful. She lived in harmony with the land, understanding its rhythms and dangers, and she had taught him to do the same. Jacob felt a deep sense of gratitude. Aelin had saved his life, guided his recovery, and taught him invaluable lessons about survival and character. But more than that, she had shown him the importance of connection, the way trust, patience, and compassion could change a person. He understood that his experience in the canyon was not just about healing his body, but also about transforming his heart and mind. As the day wore on, they continued their slow journey. Jacob carried small bundles of herbs, helping Aelin with the tasks of daily survival. Their teamwork deepened the bond between them. Jacob realized that he was learning not only practical skills, but also the values Aelin embodied: respect for life, patience with challenges, and care for others. These lessons were as vital as any physical aid she had provided. They reached a small plateau overlooking the canyon, and Jacob paused to catch his breath. The view was breathtaking: jagged cliffs, hidden streams, and the vast desert stretching endlessly beyond. Aelin stood beside him silently, her gaze steady on the land. Jacob felt a quiet sense of peace in that moment. He realized that he had been changed, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. He had come into the canyon injured and uncertain, but he would leave with knowledge, resilience, and a deeper understanding of humanity. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Aelin prepared their shelter for the night. Jacob helped, carrying small branches and arranging stones, but Aelon's guidance ensured everything was safe and secure. They shared a simple meal, and for the first time, Jacob felt a sense of true companionship. It was not spoken, but it was real, a connection formed through shared struggle, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. As night fell, the canyon grew calm and still. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow on their surroundings. Jacob lay nearby, reflecting on the lessons of the day. He thought about the land, the hidden springs, and the rugged paths they had traversed. Most of all, he thought about Aelon, the young Apache woman who had saved him and taught him so much without expecting anything in return. He realized that she had changed him in ways he could not yet fully articulate. Aelon kept watch, her eyes alert but calm. She had guided Jacob through the canyon, taught him how to survive, and ensured his safety. But she had also imparted something more subtle, the value of trust, patience, and compassion. Jacob had learned that strength was not only about physical endurance, but also about understanding, kindness, and resilience. During the night, Jacob reflected on how far he had come. He could walk without leaning heavily on the stick, move with greater confidence, and navigate the terrain with care. But the most important change was within him. He felt a sense of humility, recognizing that he had been given a rare gift, someone who cared for him selflessly and taught him lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. Aelon, too, seemed aware of the transformation taking place. Though she spoke little, her actions conveyed approval and patience. She guided him with care, correcting small mistakes in posture or movement, and encouraged him to trust in himself. Jacob began to understand that their time together was not only about healing his body, but also about preparing him for life beyond the canyon. By dawn, Jacob was stronger still. He could walk longer distances, carry small loads, and navigate uneven terrain with minimal assistance. Aelon encouraged him gently, praising his progress in her quiet, understated way. He realized that he had grown not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. He felt a deeper appreciation for life, for kindness, and for the resilience of those who faced challenges with courage and grace. As the sun rose, casting warm light across the canyon, Jacob and Aelon prepared to continue their journey. The bond between them had grown stronger, built on trust, shared experience, and mutual respect. Jacob understood that he owed much to Aelon, not just his life, but a new perspective, a deeper understanding of strength and the lessons of patience, compassion, and resilience. They moved slowly but steadily through the canyon, facing small obstacles with teamwork and careful planning. Jacob carried supplies for Aelon, assisted with tasks, and followed her guidance. With each step, he felt more capable, confident, and connected to the land and to the woman who had changed his life. As evening approached, they returned to the small shelter. Jacob felt exhaustion, but also satisfaction and gratitude. He realized that Aelon's influence had transformed him in ways that extended beyond survival. She had taught him to see the world differently, to value patience and compassion, and to understand that true strength often lay in helping others and trusting them in return. That night, as Jacob lay near the fire, he felt a quiet peace he had not known in years. He reflected on the lessons of the past days, the careful guidance, the patience, the knowledge of the land, and the subtle, powerful influence of Aelon. He understood that his life had been changed forever, and that the encounter with this forgotten Apache bride had left a mark that would endure far beyond the canyon walls. The morning sun broke over the canyon, casting a warm, golden light across the rocky cliffs. Jacob Miller stretched carefully, testing his ankle for the last time. The pain had almost vanished, replaced by strength he had not felt since his accident. He looked at Aelon, the young Apache woman who had saved his life, with a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and awe. She was already preparing their small breakfast, moving with calm precision, her dark eyes alert to every detail of the canyon around them. Jacob rose slowly, testing his strength as he walked a short distance to a nearby rock. His legs felt steady, and he realized that he could now walk without leaning heavily on the stick Aelon had made for him. For the first time since his fall, he felt a sense of independence returning. Yet he knew he owed it all to her guidance, her patience, and her quiet wisdom. He turned to her and tried to speak, but the words felt inadequate. How could he ever truly thank someone who had given him life, knowledge, and perspective? Aelon noticed his hesitation and smiled faintly. Her smile was small but warm, a quiet acknowledgement that no words were necessary. She gestured for him to continue walking along a safe path she had cleared for him, pointing out rocks to avoid and patches of soft ground for better footing. Jacob followed, feeling a newfound respect for her skill and intuition. She had lived in these canyons for years, learning every secret of the land, and she shared that knowledge freely with him, a stranger without expectation of reward. As they walked together, Jacob's thoughts wandered to the lessons he had learned over the past days. Aeon had shown him the value of patience, how rushing through life could bring danger, while careful observation and measured actions could bring safety and understanding. She had taught him about trust, how to rely on others when needed, and how to offer help without expecting anything in return. But most of all, she had taught him about courage, the quiet, persistent kind that endured hardships without complaint and acted with compassion even when the world seemed harsh. The canyon opened into a small, hidden valley filled with shrubs, wildflowers, and a trickling stream. Jacob paused to take in the view. It was breathtaking, a secret oasis that few had likely ever seen. Aeon knelt by the water, cupping it in her hands and drinking deeply before gesturing for Jacob to do the same. The cool water refreshed him, and he realized that this canyon, once a place of fear and danger, had become a place of growth and learning, all because of her presence and guidance. Jacob spoke softly, almost to himself. I don't know how to repay you," he said. Aeon looked at him, her expression calm and steady. She shook her head slightly. "No repay, helping is enough," she said. Her words were simple, yet filled with a profound meaning that Jacob understood more deeply than he could express. It was a lesson he would carry forever, that the greatest acts of kindness were often given freely, without expectation of reward. As the day wore on, they continued their journey through the canyon. Jacob's movements were steady, his confidence growing with each step. He began to help Aeon with small tasks, gathering water, carrying light supplies, and learning to move with care over the rocky terrain. Their teamwork strengthened the bond between them, creating a sense of partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Jacob realized that he had not only regained his physical strength, but had also learned invaluable lessons about resilience, patience, and the power of compassion. During a rest under a cluster of trees, Jacob asked Aeon about her family. Her expression softened and she gestured to the distant cliffs. "Family, far, life took different path," she said quietly. Jacob sensed the sadness in her words, but he also sensed her strength. Despite the losses she had endured, she had found a way to survive, thrive, and offer kindness to others. Her resilience inspired him, showing him that life's hardships could be met with courage, patience, and grace. Jacob began to reflect on how much he had changed since his accident. He had entered the canyon weak, injured, and uncertain, fearing that he might not survive. But through Aeon's guidance, care, and wisdom, he had regained his strength, learned essential skills for survival, and discovered lessons about life, kindness, and trust. He realized that she had given him more than physical healing. She had transformed his understanding of himself and the world around him. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon in warm shades of orange and pink, Jacob and Aeon prepared their small camp for the night. Aeon moved with her usual efficiency, arranging supplies, preparing food, and ensuring their shelter was safe. Jacob assisted where he could, carrying small branches and helping with simple tasks. They worked together in silence, their connection deepening without the need for words. That evening, Jacob felt a mixture of gratitude and melancholy. He knew that soon he would leave the canyon, return to his life, and continue his work as a cowboy. But he also knew that his experiences here would remain with him forever. He had been saved, guided, and taught by someone remarkable, a woman who had given her time, knowledge, and compassion without expecting anything in return. He realized that her influence would shape not only his recovery but the rest of his life. As night fell, the stars shone brightly above the canyon. Jacob lay near the fire, feeling a sense of peace he had not known in years. He reflected on the lessons Aeon had taught him, the importance of patience, the value of trust, and the quiet power of compassion. He thought about how her guidance had changed him, how her example had inspired him to be more aware, more kind, and more courageous in his own life. Aeon sat nearby, tending the fire and keeping watch. Though she spoke little, her presence was reassuring. She had guided Jacob through the canyon, ensured his safety, and helped him regain his strength. But more than that, she had given him a gift he could never repay. The understanding that life was not only about survival, but also about connection, empathy, and the quiet acts of kindness that could change a person's path forever. By dawn, Jacob was ready to continue his journey beyond the canyon. He could walk with ease, navigate the terrain confidently, and carry his supplies without assistance. Aelin encouraged him gently, showing him the safest paths down the canyon and the easiest ways to cross streams. She spoke little, but every gesture, every careful instruction reinforced the lessons he had learned over the past days. As they reached the canyon's edge, Jacob turned to her. I will never forget you," he said softly. Aelin nodded, her expression calm but warm. She had no need for promises or gratitude. Her work had been done, and she knew that Jacob carried her lessons in his heart. "Go live well," she said simply, her words carrying the weight of experience, care, and quiet strength. Jacob began his descent, moving steadily toward the open plains beyond the canyon. He paused several times to look back, seeing Aelin standing at the edge, watching him leave. He realized that she would remain a part of his life forever, not in person, perhaps, but in the lessons she had taught him and the example she had set. He carried her wisdom with him, understanding that her influence would guide him through challenges he had not yet faced. As he rode his horse toward the distant horizon, Jacob reflected on the transformation that had occurred. He had entered the canyon a vulnerable, injured man, uncertain of his fate. He was leaving stronger, wiser, and more aware of the world around him. Aelin had shown him that courage, patience, and compassion were as essential as physical strength, and that even a single act of kindness could ripple outward, shaping a person's life in ways both immediate and lasting. Jacob traveled for many days after leaving the canyon. He found himself approaching challenges differently, with greater patience and understanding. He remembered Aelin's lessons on observing the land, preparing for danger, and acting with care. He also carried the deeper lesson of compassion, the knowledge that helping others, even without expectation, could transform lives in ways that could never be measured. Over time, Jacob shared these lessons with others. He spoke to fellow cowboys about patience, awareness, and the importance of kindness in a harsh world. He used the survival skills Aelin had taught him, applying them in the fields, on the trail, and in difficult situations. Each time he remembered her, he felt gratitude and inspiration, a reminder of the power of courage, wisdom, and quiet strength. Though Aelin remained in her canyon, living quietly and independently, she had made a lasting impact. She had changed Jacob's life in profound ways, not through words or promises, but through her actions, her patience, and her unwavering kindness. The lessons she had imparted would continue to shape him, guiding his decisions, relationships, and understanding of the world. And so, the forgotten Apache bride who lived alone in the canyon had altered the path of a young cowboy's life forever. Her influence was subtle but powerful, a reminder that acts of compassion, patience, and courage could resonate far beyond the moment, shaping lives and inspiring change in ways that might never be fully seen or acknowledged. Jacob would never forget her, the woman who had saved him, taught him, and shown him that life's greatest lessons often came from those who acted with quiet wisdom and selfless care. And though their paths had diverged, the bond formed in the canyon remained, a silent testament to the enduring power of kindness, resilience, and human connection.